So I'm super pumped about today's build. It's actually something that I've been wanting to teach for a long time. Just really didn't know the best way to do it. This item fits perfectly with our smalls that sell and making money with woodworking because it can be made using common material and basic tools. I kept running across the exact same item that always made the best seller list, and that is a bench like this. Everyone loves these things and they're super expensive, but there was always one problem that would keep these off of our list: the mortises that are cut through these bench tops. Yes, there's other bulkier ways that you can fasten these from underneath, but honestly, the mortise in these things is what sets these things apart from a super cheap bench to a super high-end one. And in order to cut this mortise, you would need a large drill press with a mortising jig that also had the capabilities to angle. So you know me and what we do on this channel. Whenever we come across a problem, we rack our brains until we can come up with an easier solution, and I believe that I have done just that. We're going to build these benches that they're selling for over $500. We're also going to be cutting these mortises into them, and we're going to do it using a jigsaw. So for those of you that are new to the channel, the jigsaw is my absolute favorite tool in the entire workshop, just because of its versatility. Why I did not think of this earlier, I have no clue. But yes, we are going to attempt to make this super awesome bench just using a $10 2x12. And again, this project is so awesome because it's super easy, super cheap, and best of all, you can knock this out in an afternoon. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just to cut my board into two different parts. Since I want my bench top to be 60 inches long, I'm going to cut it at 60 inches. The end of the board that's left over, let's take it over to the table saw and cut some leg stock. Obviously, we're going to be needing 4 legs for this, so we'll cut 4 strips at 1.25 inches by 1.5 inches. Now, I'm not going to cut these to length just yet, and you'll see why here in a minute. Another thing that makes this project so unique is that the legs will actually be inset at an angle. So it's not like we're just going to be cutting square holes that go straight down. These things are actually going to kick off to the side and to the back. But if you're a plans in the hand type of person, head over to my website. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. So now we'll go ahead and cut our angles on the ends of our legs. But what I was saying earlier about not cutting these legs to length yet, well, this is why. This board has a little bit of a twist to it. Yes, you could take this out with a planer or a belt sander, but if you do not have one of those, we'll actually level this thing out after we cut our mortises and install. Yes, it's still going to have this little twist in it, but this is a rustic bench, and unless you're down looking at it like this, you're never going to know. The main thing is, we don't want somebody to sit on this thing and to start rocking. Alright, so for these legs, I'm going to show you a couple of different options. I'm going to give you an option to put a compound miter on it. I'm also going to give you an option for just an angle. So if you have a compound miter saw, you can actually angle these to the side and back. Or if you're just using a regular miter saw, you'll just have an angle going to the side. So if you're not using a compound miter, just set your saw to 15 degrees. Make a 15-degree miter cut with the 1.5 inch face facing down. If you're installing the legs like this, you can go ahead and cut all 4 of your legs using the exact same setting. It's really not going to matter. But if you want a compound miter on this, we're going to set our saw to 15 degrees to the left, and then we're going to set our bevel to 15 degrees. And then we'll make our cut. Now for the compound miters, we'll be making these legs in sets. So for the second leg of our set, instead of resetting the saw, we'll just put our stock on the opposite side and make the same cut. So for the first board that we cut, I'm going to put an L on this because it's going to be a left-sided leg. In the second board for our set, I'm going to put an R. This will just help to keep me from getting confused a bit later. Then we'll just do the exact same thing for the remaining 2. So now with all 4 of my legs cut, I'm still not going to cut these to the exact size yet, but I am going to trim these down to 24 inches long, just to make it a little easier for installing down the line. Again, this cut doesn't have to be perfect. We're just getting rid of some excess material. Okay, so this next step is probably one of the most important steps, and that's going to be deciding which side is going to be your top. And it really depends on what look you're going for. Since I'm going for more of a rustic look, I'm actually going to pick the side that kind of looks the worst. It has some cracks in it, has some of the saw blade marks still left on the sides. Perfect for me. So I'm going to sand this top up so it's nice and smooth, almost like it's been sat on and worn. And then once I get it nice and perfect, then I'm going to beat the heck out of it. Actually, I'm just distressing this thing a little bit, adding some character, making it actually look like that it's been around for 100 years. Now, it's been taken care of during that 100 years, but life happens. Some people absolutely hate this look. I personally love it. If you want a nice, clean look, you do you. That is the awesome thing about woodworking. You have the freedom to put your creative twist into all of your projects. And if you want to add a little more definition to your grain, you can just take a wire brush and just remove a bit of the softwood. And then if you really want to get into it, you can take a small pick to make groups of insect holes. Yep, it's really the only time that you would want to see something like that in your woods. Then once you have the bench top the way that you'd like it, go ahead and work the legs a little bit so that they match. Alright, so now that you have everything kind of distressed up the way that you want, or not distressed, let's go ahead and get everything laid out for our mortises. I'm going to be doing the cuts with the face of the bench facing up. And I want my leg placement to be 6.5 inches from each end and 2 inches from each side. So I'm just going to mark all of these out onto my board. Again, since we cut these legs in pairs, take a right and left leg, and then just add a 1 and a 2 to each one of these sets, just to help to keep me from getting these mixed up. So the first one that I'm going to be tracing will be 1R. I'll be tracing the flush cut side of the leg, with the 1.5 inch side facing the end. Alright, so now with my leg traced out, I know what you're probably thinking. If we're going to be cutting this out with a jigsaw at an angle, which way should my blade be angled? So this is what your jigsaw will end up looking like once we get our angle set. We'll cover that here in a minute. So the main question is going to be, which direction should this angled blade be pointed? So in order to get this angled look that we're going for, when you're cutting the top and bottom lines, the blade will always be angled toward the outside edge. And if you wanted to draw the little arrows like I am, it may help a little bit. But after you do your first one, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So now we'll get our remaining 3 legs marked. Then we're ready to start cutting. Okay, so before we actually start cutting, we actually need to set our jigsaw to cut this 15-degree angle. Now most jigsaws will come with a plate that looks something like this, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly where 15 degrees is at. Now there's several different ways that you can make sure that this is set to 15 degrees. You can use angle finders or really any type of tool like that. But the simplest and cheapest way to do it is just to take a piece of your scrap wood, cut it to 15 degrees on your miter saw, then we'll just set it based on this. So with my plate flat, we'll just angle the plate until the blade sits flush with our 15-degree cut. Now we have a perfect setup with no expensive tools needed. Next we'll just lock it down and it's ready to cut. So before we can get started on cutting, we need to drill a pilot hole for our blade. And since we don't want to drill into our angles, we're just going to put this right in the dead center. I'm going to do one last thing before I get started, just in case I need to pivot this table to the right or the left. I'm going to see where the 15 degrees is lining up at. And I actually have a 15-degree mark. If I didn't have these, I would just put a mark on each side at 15 degrees with my pencil. So I'm going to start by cutting my top and my bottom. And remember, for those, we want the blade to be angled down. And we're not going to be able to just keep this left side of the setting the entire time. We may have to angle this plate in a different direction. But I'm just going to slowly work up to my line and straighten it out. Let the jigsaw do the work. You don't have to put a ton of pressure on this. The main thing is that we don't want to force the cut, making the blade lose its track. Then once you get into your inside corner, you can just rotate your plate to 15 degrees on the opposite side, and then start working on the rest of your line. Once we get our top and bottoms cut, then we'll move to our sides. Again, making sure to keep the blade angle facing towards the outside edge. Yes, this is going to seem a bit tedious at first. Cutting these things out with a chisel, that'd be a lot more tedious. So now with our first mortise cut, we'll just clean this up a little bit with the jigsaw, but everything's looking great. Now whenever you go to dry fit or test it out with your leg, you'll actually be able to see what you need to remove. If you need to take off excess material, I would do it from the bottom because that's not going to be seen. Then once your hole is cleaned up, we're going to insert our leg at the top with our longest angle pointing out. Now this is probably going to be pretty snug, so you may have to use a mallet to get this into place. So I want this bench to be right around 19.5 inches tall, so I'm going to make a 4-inch mark on the top of my leg. I'll bring that down flush with the top of my bench. We'll obviously be cutting the top of this off, but by having the extra, it's going to allow us to balance everything out. Okay, so I installed this first one just as a demo on how we're going to be doing all of this. You need to cut all of your mortises first, because if not, this little stob's going to be in the way of your jigsaw. So I'm just going to hammer this on out. I'll put it back in once I get all my mortises cut. Then we'll just repeat this for the remaining 3 legs. After you get the first one done, the other 3 go a lot quicker. Now this is the first time I've ever tried out one of these double-sided blades. Man, They actually work pretty well. They really come in handy for cleaning up the edges. One thing else that you may have to do whenever you get to an inside corner is to lift up on your jigsaw just a little bit so that the bottom of the blade can connect the cut. Or you can flip your board over and make your cuts from the opposite side. So if you've noticed in a lot of my videos, I try to use the simplest tool that I can to achieve whatever type of task that I'm trying to do. So like in this case, I know some of you guys are probably thinking, you have a mortising jig. I've seen it in the background of your videos. Or if I'm showing someone how to do something with a circular saw, that I have the upgraded tools to do it much easier. The reason why I like to teach this way is because I didn't always have these extra tools. I mean, I literally started off woodworking with a $10 box saw. I've been the person that can only do the projects that can be done using simple tools. And you know, it kind of stinks whenever you see a project that you really want to do, but you don't have the tools to do it. So I try to figure out ways to do these projects using tools that anyone can afford. Now, is it bad if you have a mortising jig and you use it on this? Absolutely not. But by doing it this way, anybody can make this project. And since I honestly believe that woodworking should be for everyone, well, this is the way that I'm going to teach it. And even if you do have the luxury of the nicer tools, if you hang around the channel long enough, I can guarantee you that you still may pick up a new tip or a trick. So once you have all 4 of your holes cut and your legs kind of roughed in, now we can install those. I'm just going to say that I tried out multiple different jigsaw blades for this, and this one actually worked the best. It's kind of a funky looking blade. It's by Specters. I'll make sure to link it in the description. It just cut the best and worked out the best for this project. Now, if you remember, we left some extra length on these legs. Just to use as a reference guide on my leg, I'm going to take the edge with the longest tip, and on the opposite side, I'm going to measure 4 inches down. And then I'll mark this. That way I know whenever I'm installing this and I get to my mark, I'm getting pretty close to where I need to be. So I won't install it any further until we get to the fine tuning. Alright, so now that we have all 4 of our legs in, I've kind of figured out that the legs honestly didn't need to be this long. We can still adjust the height with them being much shorter. So I'm actually going to remove some material from each one of these. I'm going to leave 1.5 inches of material sticking up to make our adjustments and to make our notches for pressure locking these things in. Now you can use a handsaw, oscillating tool, really whatever that you'd like. Cut these down to 1.5 inches. But if you decrease the length of your legs to start with, you don't have to worry about it. But since I've been using a jigsaw for most of this video, that's what I'm going to use. Now these cuts do not have to be perfect because once we get done adjusting this thing, we're going to cut them again. Alright, so for this next step, you heard me say something about a groove for a pressure wedge. Well, this is what I'm talking about. Okay, not necessarily this hammer, but we've all seen it. At the end of a lot of old tools and super old joinery, you'll notice that they've made a cut at the end, and then they've driven a wedge in there just to separate the material to create a pressure joint. And that's what they've done with furniture since about the beginning of time. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to be cutting a notch in what's sticking out of each one of these boards. Since we really don't know how much adjustment we're going to have to do, I'm going to go ahead and just mark my boards where they're at. Then I'm going to give them a couple of taps back up. That way whenever I'm making my cut, I don't get into the bench top. Honestly, if you're going for the rustic look, well, it really wouldn't matter. But let's go ahead and do it. And again, you can make these straight line cuts using a handsaw or anything that you would like. But again, since I've been using the jigsaw, I'm going to go ahead and adjust my legs so that I can reach the line that I marked with the jigsaw. Now with my legs sticking up, I'm just going to make a notch straight down until I hit my mark. And really, that's all there is to it. We'll do this for the tops of all 4. Now if you notice, I'm trying to follow the angle of the leg with the jigsaw, but if you're a little off, no big deal. We're going to put some wood glue around each one of our edges and then hammer our legs back down, leaving about 1/2 inch sticking out. Okay, let's put it on the table and see what she looks like. See, we've got a lot of space under this leg. Good thing we can still adjust it. So we're just going to drop this leg down until it hits the table. Then I'm just going to get a quick level on one side and one end. We won't be able to get this thing completely level because it has that little bit of a twist in it. But we can set everything up so we don't have to worry about our legs rocking. So now that the bench is nice and sturdy, let's go ahead and get our wedges to put in. Now the wedges can be made out of any type of material. You just need them to be about 1.5 inches wide. Typically whenever you're building furniture, you want the color of your wedges to contrast the color of the material that you're putting them in. But you can use any type of material. I have a scrap piece of walnut laying around, so I'm going to cut a few wedges and use that. Now we'll just cut our tops off flush and install our wedges. Since we have plenty of leftover material, I'm going to take another couple pieces of 1.5 by 1.25 and put some side supports on this just to set it off. And yes, this should be 15-degree angles on both sides. But just to make sure, I'm going to raise mine up about 3.5 inches from the ground and then just trace out my legs. This will make sure that even if I'm a little bit off, this will be nice and straight. Then I'll cut it out from those traced angles. Then I'm going to attach these by drilling a hole through my leg, then using a 3/8 inch dowel rod. This is really going to give it the authentic look. And again, you can expand on this by adding another leg support, or even one that goes all the way across the bottom. Okay, so now with those last minute little cross pieces in, now you can stain this, paint this, stain it maybe. Pretty much any way that you'd like. I really like our little leg braces there, and this thing would actually look super cool with another one going all the way across. We may do that later, but for right now, I think it's looking pretty awesome. I'm going to do some sanding and some staining, see what I can come up with. If anybody's wondering about the stain colors that I've used, I started with a honey colored Mim Wax, let that dry, and then went back over it with just a little darker stain to highlight this grain. And this thing turned out awesome. We took a $10 construction grade 2x12 and turned it into a beautiful piece of furniture. And again, this just shows you that with an open mind and a bit of creativity, the possibilities are endless. But if you watch the channel, you know what the first step is. You have to get up, get out, and get your make on. Till next time, we'll see you. Imagine taking a pile of wood and turning it into something amazing. Now, imagine doing that without years of frustration. You do not need a fancy workshop, expensive tools, or years of experience. With Woodworking Kickstart, you'll build confidence and real skills in no time. So you can spend years making mistakes and learning the hard way like I did, or you can start building with confidence today. So join me in Woodworking Kickstart and let's get your journey started.